bit of a dodgy slot in between the bar, the graveyard shift, I think they call it on the speaking circuit. But hopefully I'll keep you engaged for the next half hour. Are we going to have time for questions at the end, maybe? Yeah. We'll play it by ear. Also, it's great to see a couple of Mo-bros in the audience, a couple of blokes with moustaches. We're all, you might have seen a few more men on the streets with their Mo's. We're all raising awareness for men's cancer, such as testicular and prostate. So, quick story. I just found out this morning that my passport has no more pages in for any more China visas, so I've actually got to go and get a 10-year passport made with this face, which means I'm going to be living with a moustache for 10 years, not just November. Okay, so yeah, over the next half hour, I'll give you a little bit of history about how we started up the business. We've been trading for 5 years. I'll share with you some of the successes we've had, and then I'd like to focus on going global and some of the things that have worked really well for us as a business to start exporting. Hopefully have time to give you a little case study of us in America. So for those of you who don't know, let's have a quick show of hands. Who knows what a Trunki actually is? Oh, that's not bad. The marketing's working. About 80% almost. Oh, that's good. For those who don't, here's a quick demonstration video, because I haven't brought a Trunki along, how shameful. But they're the world's first and only ride-on suitcases for globe-trotting tots. They kind of teach kids the responsibility to look after their own possessions. Yeah, they function as a ride-on to keep them entertained at the airport, and parents can tow them along when they get tired, and they get sore little feet quite often. They come in a range of flavours, or we call them characters, and they're brightly coloured. Kids love them, parents really see the value in them, and they're called Funky Trunkies. So the story behind coming up with the idea started back in 1997 while I was studying product design at the University of Northumbria. As a second-year student, I was asked to, or our class was asked to enter a national luggage design competition that happened to be sponsored by a big plastics manufacturer, so it had to be a piece of plastic luggage if you wanted to win. And I went off to a local department store to try and find some inspiration in the luggage department, and couldn't really find any. I thought it was pretty boring, the whole luggage market. Everything was black, it was all dull. And I don't know how I ended up there, must be the big kid in me or something, but I found myself stood in the kids' toy section looking at ride-on toys. You're probably all familiar with the classic ride-on tractor. You can lift up the lid, the seat, and there's enough storage space there for perhaps an apple and a banana, but that's about it. So the penny dropped, and I thought, why not use a completely different manufacturing technique that could create a really useful space that could function as a luggage space, and sculpt it and style it so it's functional as a ride-on and make it look quite cute and attractive to kids, and it might be a cool idea to develop for this competition. I went on to win the competition in '98. There's me back with a full head of hair, still jealous of that picture. But all credit to the judges, they took me aside and said, you know, you've got a really commercial idea here. You should go off and approach the manufacturers and see if they'll license it. So that sounds like a good idea, and get some royalties. Yeah, maybe I can retire early. That'd be brilliant. So I did some research, and some of you in the room may remember Carlson's suitcases back in the day. They used to manufacture in Croydon back in '98, so I got an appointment with them, went down with my prototypes of the Trunki, and really excited. They're going to love it. Here's my Trunki, what do you think? Oh, it's great, isn't it? And they were like, they scratched their chins a bit and said, yeah, it's a nice idea, but I don't really think it's luggage. I think it's really a toy product, so you should go and talk to a toy manufacturer, but best of luck, so thanks a lot. Okay, let's get the yellow pages out again, do some more research, and then I went and found one of the UK's largest toy companies and knocked on their door, got my foot in, presented my Trunki. It's great, isn't it? What do you think? And they scratched their chins for a bit, and yeah, maybe. They actually looked into it for a whole year. It dragged on for ages, the heads of terms, and eventually they turned around and said, you know what? We think it's a piece of luggage. It's not a toy, it's not for us. Okay, so back to the drawing board. Because of all the time that took, I had to then focus on my studies. I ended up graduating with a first-class degree, and my first job was out in Taiwan, so I was a little bit precious about showing my idea out there in the Far East. I then worked in New York and Australia and travelled quite a bit. Kept seeing these bored children in airports screaming away, and thought, oh, it'd be a great idea to do Trunki. I came back to the UK in 2001, so yeah, been to at the tail end of the last recession. And despite a glowing CV, getting my foot in the door with all the leading design consultancies around the country, no one had a full-time position to offer me. So I was able to pick up some freelance work, but had some free time. So I approached the Prince's Trust, asked them for a bit of help, and they gave me some incredibly valuable mentoring back very early on as a small little business. They also gave me a £4,000 loan and a £500 grant, which was very useful for me to start the business up. Still back then, it was very focused on trying to get this product licensed. So I went off to the London Toy Fair with a really well thought out business plan and strategy about how to go out there and do it. And in February 2003, I found a startup toy business who, for the first time, I showed them the Trunki and they absolutely loved it. And we pretty much signed the deal there and then on their stand at the trade show. Still slightly bitter to this day, my £4,000 loan went entirely on solicitor fees, so I wish I had Tony to talk to back then. But yeah, we did the deal. They had a global licensing deal to produce the Trunki product. They made it out in China, and quite quickly in the process, they ended up signing up their first customer, which was out in the Middle East. It was a brand called Fula. It's the equivalent of Barbie. Barbie doesn't go down too well out in the Middle East. Trying to think of polite words, but I guess whore's probably the best way to sum up how they think, what they think of Barbie. So they created their own brand. Very interestingly, instead of buying Ken, the doll, you actually buy her male teacher. I'll leave that with you. But yeah, so they were a great brand for that market, and we quickly got a deal with them, and they bought a few containers of Trunkis from China. They created a great little TV advert, and it all started off really well. 3 years later, the toy company, with their global licensing deal, was still selling only to this company in Saudi Arabia. Trunki had never got to the UK, never made it to the US, never made it outside of the Middle East. I'd always been very disappointed with their performance, despite me trying to kick them up the arse, so to speak, and come up with new designs and styles. It just kind of kept falling over. I think really in hindsight, they were promoting it as purely as a ride-on toy to toy buyers and in the outdoor sections, and they were completely missing the whole value of the product when you market it to the parent. So in October 2005, I'm jumping around a bit, but for the 3 years that they were doing the licensing deal, I was working as a design consultant in Bristol, working for some of these brands, and my job was really to go and talk to the brand managers, trying to innovate new products for their categories. But it really gave me such a strong insight into brand and the power of brand that when it came in October 2005, I took a phone call from them saying that they'd gone into liquidation and they couldn't take on the Trunki anymore. I kind of didn't take me a couple of breaths before I was actually breathed a sigh of relief and thought actually I could do a better job than they could with my kind of understanding of brand and positioning of the product. So it was actually quite a dark week that week. I also got a phone call from my long-term girlfriend of 7 years who decided to call it a day as well. But it actually freed up a lot more of my time. She was living in London, I was in Bristol. It wasn't really working. So yeah, I had a lot of time on my hands. I was really passionate about taking Trunki to market, and also as a professional product designer, I was getting a little bit disillusioned where a lot of these brands like Domestos were trying to convince people to put more bleach down the toilet. We even came up with an electronic deodorant can concept that ended up needing 6 AAA batteries, yet it was supposed to remove CFCs, so it kind of didn't really stack up environmentally. So I really thought, right, I'm ready to try and start my own business manufacturing this product. So we started up in 2006. I borrowed as much money as I could on a personal loan, borrowed a little bit off my parents, even got a couple of quid off my gran, and it all went towards buying the first container. So we started up, there's a factory in China that was making it for X, it cost so much to store, this much to ship, all seemed to stack up, and I placed my first order. But as the slide says, the factory kind of went bust out in China. And as out in China, when a factory goes under, the government come in and seize all the assets within that factory, including my incredibly expensive steel molds that make the Trunkis. So we ended up having to bribe some Chinese officials to open the gates for a couple of minutes so we could push the tooling out and move it to another factory. And we had to rush production very quickly, set up with another factory, and everything was set in molds so you couldn't make too many mistakes. So I thought. And the first container of Trunkies arrived back in 2006 on the 5th of May, now celebrated as Trunki's birthday. So 1,600 Terence and Trixies arrived in Avonmouth, just outside Bristol, and I started trading. It was great. I was able to hand in my notice for my current job because we had our e-commerce platform, Trunki.com, running, and I sort of drove around in my Ford cab back then, hand delivering all these Trunkies. A day or so later, I started getting quite a few phone calls from people saying, seems like you're selling a bit of a bad product. The catches keep popping open. It doesn't seem fit for purpose. And what happened was when a child sits on the Trunki, the catches popped open on about 10% of the units. The only part that wasn't made in the molds is a little metal clip, which we hadn't been as thorough with the factory when we were specifying and checking, and we ended up having the first container load having this fault. So very quickly I got the design mended, FedExed a load of catches over, and but when I was dealing with these phone calls, a lot of people were quite irate. They weren't too happy that they bought what they thought was a poor product. But by using a little bit of humour, we were able to win them round. I kind of said, oh, it sounds like you've got a poorly Trunki. Sounds like maybe it's picked up some sneezes on the ship. But fear not, I've got a remedy, and managed to convince them to fit their own catches back on the Trunki. We did a comedy little sheet of how to run your own ER in your front room. And it was actually the first experience of customer service that people had with our business, and it actually turned into quite a big positive, turning a negative into a positive.